Good Friday. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they cast lots to divide his garments. And the people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him vinegar and saying, If you're the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over his head, This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals who was hanged yelled, saying to him, Are you not Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are received the due rewards of our deeds. But this man had done nothing wrong, and he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said to him, Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. It was now about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, while the sunlight failed and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. Now when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, Certainly this man was innocent. And all the multitude who assembled to see this sight, when they saw what had taken place, returned home, beating their breast. A word from the cross. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Forgive them, Father, for what? For nailing him to the cross, for spitting at him and mocking him and laughing at him. But who were his accusers? His own people, the Jews. They did not know what they were doing. How could they not know? They had the scriptures, they had God's promise that a Messiah would come, but they chose to reject him. They chose to ignore what their own holy word had told them. They knew very well what they were doing. And today, can we be as Christ and forgive the wrongs of others that have done to us? Now on this Good Friday, we hear and can visualize the forgiveness from the cross. Christ forgave. Can we forgive when we are hurt, humiliated, wronged, scarred with the unkindness of another, be it a family member or a total stranger? Can we forgive? Does our forgiveness reach out from our cross and circle those who have hurt us? Each hurt, each pain, each broken promise, each moment of loneliness, each sorrow, each moment of guilt, hatred, and each moment of selfish living. We who claim to be the followers of Christ should be in this world following his example, especially this example of a forgiving love. I'm going to read a story that illustrates forgiveness. A doctor turned novelist tells this true story. An American family named Adams had 2 teenage daughters and a 6-year-old son, Sammy. When World War II came, the family decided to take in an orphan boy from Italy named Paul Pastrolinali. They did everything possible to comfort this frightened refugee, but the boy responded quite negatively and showed no sign of gratitude to the family except for Sammy. He adored Sammy. The two were always together. Paul went swimming against orders in a river which was contaminated and came down with a septic infection that nearly killed him. The doctor wanted Paul isolated from the rest of the family, so they made a bedroom for him in the attic. Paul was far too contagious to be seen by anyone except the doctor and the nurse who wore special clothing. One morning, the father had found the nurse had fallen asleep outside the attic door. He opened it and found Paul was not there. He ran to Sammy's room and found Paul sleeping in the bed next to Sammy. His arms thrown over the boy's shoulder and his breathing on his neck. Sammy was much younger than Paul and had not been the strongest little boy. Though everything was done for him, poor Sammy never had a chance, and he died. When the doctor visited the family a year later, he was amazed to see Mr. Adams working in the garden with a small boy. It was none other than that little refugee. The doctor, overcome with a sense of bitter injustice, exclaimed, "All I can say is he's lucky, this Paul Pastroli, whatever his name is." Mr. Adams put his arms around the boy's shoulder and said with a smile, "You'll have no more trouble with his name. His name is Paul Adams. We adopted him." I wonder if anything can come closer to being a true parable of what God, in death of his Son, has done for us. Have you ever tried to put yourself in the place of Jesus at that moment? Think for a moment of the bitter agony he was experiencing. Agony that was more than merely body agony, something far, far worse, agony of his spirit. Jesus knew that ultimately the Father would save. He knew the relationship he had with the Father was strong. He remembered the prayer in the garden that he prayed the night before. He prayed so hard that the blood dripped from his brow. The power of that prayer, the power of God's plan of salvation, saw him through this bitter agony on the cross. So he could call out now to his Father and ask the Father to once again accept him into his mighty arms. Jesus could now commit himself back into the Father's hands without any conditions, not partially, but totally. He put all of himself into God's hands, and then he died. Not only did God show his love for us through the cross, he even took your place and my place on that cross. Remember, you and I belong on this cross, not Jesus. It was not his cross he died upon. It was not his sin he suffered as he hung between heaven and hell. It was your sins and my sins. It was not his punishment he took from the Father, but our punishment. Jesus took your place and my place on the cross, and let us not forget that. I'm going to end with a poem by William Stigel entitled Good Friday. It shows us the deep love God has for us and the power it took for him to allow his Son to die on the cross for you and me. The power to do nothing but allow the bare soul of God through his Son be seen by everyone. The poem reads, I saw God bare his soul one day where all the earth might see the stark and naked heart of him on lonely Calvary. There was a crimson sky of blood and overhead a storm when lightning split the clouds and light engulfed his form. Beyond the storm a rainbow lent, a light to every cloud. For on the cross mine eyes beheld the naked soul of God.
That old rugged cross, so